information, but I'm thinking, okay, you got one floor in a skyscraper. How much revenue does that generate each year in rent? And you're gonna have the
If it's occupied.
well, yeah, well, okay, so that could be a whole other interesting part of your study. How many skyscrapers in America are not fully occupied? And I could almost see an ascending or descending range of skyscrapers and locations where the vacancy rate increases. That's actually where skyscrapers need to be totally reevaluated, because you've got all of these floors doing nothing. Okay, how are you going to generate revenue, and what are you going to do with it? Well, if you could generate energy, all I want to think about first and foremost is using air or wind power to generate electricity, because it's doing nothing up there right now. How much revenue could you generate? The cost of electricity, 10 cents a kilowatt? Is that what it is? Kilowatt hour?
Yeah, there's a lot of concern that comes from the vibration, though. If you're using, say, blades, there's that new one they're doing in Abu Dhabi that's giant wind turbine right in the middle of this thing. And the biggest shock of that was it vibrates a lot to the point where it makes people really sick.
Well, okay, so that's what you have to take on in your
Yeah.
thesis. It's
What's the vibration?
No, but I mean, to say that, there's vibration now in this one tower that's been built, and therefore it's off limits, we can't do that, seems foolish. And there's no reason you can't have a bunch of micro turbines.
Just say scale comes into play.
Yeah,
and then it's just a question
whether
of
it's a vertical or horizontal axis, they perform differently.
Right.
Exactly. So there might be multiple systems. They're just like solar collectors. We've seen flat plate versus the cylindrical versus PV, all these different things. So it's going to be, I think, this web of approaches. You say, okay, whatever we've got, how can we incorporate this so that it's doing something all the time.
Well, and I think also the interesting thing that has kind of come up here to me is, again, that idea of waste. And, again, if we're talking about the building earning its keep, and, we go to the scenario where this thing in a blackout has got power and all this because it generates so much, and that maybe in some cases even generates enough that it can feed back into the grid. Well, can it take on waste from other buildings?
Yeah, well, that's why
this conversion, again, that idea.
You're talking about symbiotic relationships.
Right. And if you're talking cradle to cradle, one of the tenets of that in McDonough's world is waste equals food.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So again, that concept of waste conversion, and then
waste equals energy.
Right. Waste equals energy. Waste equals fertilization for a vertical agricultural endeavor, what have you. But I think that one of the other things too is that, and I kind of throw this out and see how Margaret and Ralph feel. I don't think this is something that you can play safe at all.
No.
I think it has to be, you have to push ideas to their logical extreme and farther. And at a certain point, be willing to say, this right now is not quote unquote feasible or reasonable. But with what we're learning, in 10 years, it would not be unreasonable to think that this could happen. So does that become part of the planning to say that, it's not a frozen design, but that over a period of time we see this portion of it converting from this to accommodate a potential new technology that might be 10 years away?
I should approach this from the zombie house count. And that's they just assume zombies all over. Those little dots are not people down there. Ralph drew, they're zombies. Don't touch the ground.
Well, this goes back to the question initially about whether or not this is going to be more speculative and radical, or whether it's going to sort of say take the next small incremental step on what we know works now. And so I think Ed's proposition to you is really exciting and probably addresses the Evolo aspect of it. More
Evolo as well, not zombies.
Well, and I think even if we take Evolo out of the discussion,
still worth.
To me, I don't think that a thesis that says well, here's the next little increment, is a thesis that's worth pursuing. I think you'll get bored with it, and the possibility exists that by the time you put your book together and all that, yeah, somebody's already done that, and now we're trying to find the next thing.
Yeah.
So you've got to shoot farther down the runway. And I mean, to me, one of the values of research in any framework is to start defining the realm of the possible,
Yeah.
not necessarily the realm of the likely. Because I could imagine, you do something that's, someone looks at and says this is absolutely outrageous, and then when you're our age, you're pulling the book down off the shelf and showing it to somebody, and they're saying, "Oh yeah, they just built that."
Mm-hmm.
But what I think is interesting is that, what drives the radical, crazy thing you're going to suggest is a clear understanding of why this has to happen. I mean, if we're going to hold on to what we have now and make it viable in the future, rather than have it just be one massive fail, which is kind of what it feels like right now, right? Buildings, new and old, just sitting there empty and behaving very badly, and people not being able to do anything with them other than squat in them. So the idea that you could really propose this new nested ecology that begins to find ways to make reality out of the energy, food, waste, that beneficial loop. Saying, okay, we can actually go on. So there's your hope scenario brought up large.
The foundation systems are way bigger now. It's too small.
I ran out of blackboard. Well, I mean, I think the idea is that you try to figure out how this what am I trying to say? How you this has to be three-dimensional, obviously, but how you four-dimensional. Well, no, it has to
Three
be.
wasn't enough.
No, you're
Yeah,
right. It
no,
has to
it's
be
good.
four-dimensional because you're constantly having a kind of inputs and outputs.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
That's why this diurnal, and maybe that's how you start conceiving of the time. It's
Yeah.
always about the diurnal, or maybe it's the seasonal as well. But
The peak systems, peak moments.
yeah,
right?
and so what does it take for any, regardless of the program inside a building, what does it take for a building to perform over the course of 24 hours? Every 24 hours, what are the cycles? And I think it comes down to pretty much energy and waste first and foremost, and then all the other things kind of follow.
Yeah.
But if you start with that, I think that's a position it's an atypical position to start with.
Mm-hmm.
And you asked this question, what does it look like? I think that's the least interesting question of all, because it's, I think you start with, well, how should it perform? What is it going to perform like? Because that'll just lead you to the look like response naturally. But you don't have to preconceive of what it will look like, because that will just get you nowhere.
Well, and in many ways, what it looks like is still going to end up being arbitrary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
What's a
Looks
one
Looks like
possible-
versus performs like.
well, and it's not. I mean, even the idea that again, we talk skyscraper, and we still conceive of it kind of the way Ralph's drawn it there.
Yep.
And to me, to go back to example of Evolo, to me the ones that are the most intriguing to me are the ones that break the idea that the skyscraper is only vertical. That our necessary networking requires us to start doing this as well as this. Of course, you end up sometimes with something that is one of the most nightmarish pieces of architecture that you've ever seen.
Well, District
But
9, they all
becomes the District 9 Independence Day architecture. But again, the idea of the skyscraper as phallus is probably not where the next generation is going to be. And you understand why it's like that, because you've got this much land that you have to maximize, so you go up, and you don't have the right to go over here and over here.
That's exactly why
under
the skyscraper
the current
vertical
economic
tower
system.
Continue from.
Right. So, even, whether it is predominantly vertically or multi-directional in terms of its networking, the skin you put on it in many ways becomes an arbitrary selection based upon taste. Even in the response to say, well, the skin needs to be able to produce energy, the skin needs to be able to breathe, the skin needs to be able to do this. You still have options now that you can go catalog shopping if you want to, which is always a very dangerous approach to design. But I really think it is about how does it work.
So if you go catalog shopping, I think you go catalog shopping for wind turbines and PV panels and all of that, and find out what's out there or what's next, and then see what happens when those things totally dominate the skyscraper. And I agree with Ed, but I think also for this semester, the next couple of months, just sticking with the vertical skyscraper, because there's so much untapped potential in that as it is, I think is perfectly fine. I don't think you need to start looking at the leapfrogging version of the skyscraper. I mean, you can if you want to, but I don't think it's going to help you address the questions that you put into play any more than a vertical tower will.
Well, I guess
I think it's more of an issue of if it goes that way because you find it needs to go that way, then that's fine. But don't necessarily say it has to do this.
Well, I guess I'm wondering if it gets back to this little diagram here, the cartoon on the board here, where you've got the new gun, the new cylinder there, and its relationship to all the four older skyscrapers, and whether or not, if this really starts with the whole question of energy and waste, if it's more of if it's an infrastructural insert, right, that is trying to bring a new level of durability and viability to an existing urban landscape. Is that what this is about? And it could be that that new thing is very much about infrastructure, very much about energy and waste capture, cogeneration, et cetera, and uses verticality to optimize these strategies and these processes, whatever they are, and may bring in some other elements. So again, what do we lack? Urban agriculture is one thing that we've been talking about. Gray water processing, things like that. So is it right there? You've got this kind of served little population that again could be replicated at will. Or does the new thing incorporate its own spaces for human activity, apart from just operational? And I guess, that's the thing about the experiential, whether or not there's, it responds to the specific location, neighborhood that it's in. You talked about downtown, midtown, uptown. If that is part of the thesis as well, that you chose a particular location so that this infrastructural element also has the social fabric component in it, or maybe the social fabric component's going away. I don't know.
I don't think it can go away at all.
I mean, I would like to see it not go away. But the thing is that if you're giving a new lease on life to all these other things, is that the primary responsibility, the primary mission of the new insertion?
I think the social trumps it all. I mean, the most iconic skyscrapers we have all have the social connotation, even if they're just outdated styles. I mean, people love the Empire State Building not because of the views, but because King Kong climbed it in some ways, and because they've seen it in 1,000 movies. And it's weird because it's just this icon, and some people work there, but why that building? And it's weird because there's 1,000 others that look like it. There's taller, obviously, but we keep coming back to these same stylistic approaches and the social component that trumps them all. Like the Empire State Building will clearly outlast anything that we build now just because we treasure it so much. It's going to become our new Parthenon. And in some ways that beats any energy performance at all, which is kind of strange.
Well,
Really quick,
okay.
before you get started, we do have a transit time limit, so if we could kind of wrap things up in like 10, 15 minutes?
Oh.
Is that possible? I extended it, but, okay, thank you.
Well, and I want to go back to one other thing about this thing, how it performs. As you talk about air, and about what is quality of air at different strata.
Yeah.
So how does the building respond? And talking about the building earning its keep, can the building help improve air quality? Can it carbon sequester? Can it regenerate? Can it, I'm going way off, but I'm sort of thinking almost as Michael Crichton sort of thing, that the building can actually heal itself and regenerate. You're even getting in the realm of nanotechnology now, which is,
Yeah.
maybe I'm pushing it way too far out there. But again, I don't think that the focus should totally be on what it's bringing in and how it's handling it internally. I think that the idea that this thing makes everything around it better, kind of like that diagram there, I think in part, one of our great opportunities here is to have all this height and all this surface area that somehow can impact environmental quality around it.
That partnership, right?
Mhm.
Making everything more viable. So, I mean, if you wanted to go to nanotechnology, I mean, we said, we talked about the other day, that like power generation on a micro scale,
Yeah.
just to flexing. I mean, I would, seriously, when you think about everything that goes on in this thing, is that enough? You start to add that up. I mean, storage becomes your issue, but, just set that aside for a second. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
These scenarios?
We've only got 10 minutes, maybe some closing remarks.
Mhm.
That might be.
Well, it might be closing remark. It's wonderful job of setting up some thought-provoking questions. The work for the next few months, I think, needs to frame those questions much more succinctly and precisely. So you're not talking about an infinite field, but a very, very finite field. And then I think you need to have some responses to the questions. And the responses themselves will bring up more questions, but I think you need to have some responses, if only to define the question more precisely. And I don't want to make language or use language as an escape or a vague escape.
Yeah.
But I think you, so far, you're opening things up, and I think you need to close things down a little bit, and that's not going to reduce the quality of the investigation, it will rather improve the quality of the investigation.
Make it achievable. Well, I'm still tremendously excited about how this is going to turn out. And again, from the get-go, this is all about taking a building type that certainly has, again, without question, iconic status and a lot of romance, a lot of power, for good reasons and not so good reasons, to command our attention, but to make it really crucially necessary to future cities. Rather than being, again, just a trophy item, which it continues to be. I mean, once again, all the press, even with their lead, blah, 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 by and large, they seem to me still largely trophy items. And so I think it's this relationship, as we said, how can this be a partner to an improved, larger urban fabric, urban condition?
Yeah.
And so that, I think, has gotten clearer about what you will be looking at. And I guess for me, whether or not the social part of it, the experiential part of it will be, how that's going to be in there is still an interesting question.
Yeah.
Because this is still places, it's still part of where we're going to live and where we're going to pass by every day. Can we go in these things, or is it like the power plant? You see it, but you don't go in it.
Well, think bigger. This is the things we put in our movies.
Yeah. Well, okay. So
On our Twitter
this
feed.
is what I think. So.
From my perspective, we had talked about this earlier while you were, prepping for this. trying to think of what my advice to you is for the next couple of weeks, over the break. And I think that, first of all, I've told you this before, at least I think I did, or hope I did. I got to commend you on, first of all, the level of dedication you have to this. The amount of research, the amount of thought, the amount of writing even, regardless of whether you're happy with the state of the writing right now or not. And more importantly, the fact that, here you are a semester into it, and you still seem very enthusiastic about your subject. And I think all of that is really stuff to be celebrated. There's part of me that wants to tell you, Mark, you got to stop for a minute, for at least a week or so, and just sort of give yourself some downtime from this, so that you can come back at it in the spring semester and not start to bog down. There's also part of me that thinks he knows you well enough to know that you're not going to do that. So I would encourage you at the very least to say, I want to really set a reasonable expectation of what I'm going to do now. Yeah. And one of those things might be to get the document or whatever to the point where you say, okay, I'm ready to send this off to somebody at Gensler. I think starting to make that connection and starting that dialogue will be really important before you delve too deep into the design phase.
Oh, yeah.
Front load that.
Yeah. In addition, I'm going to go back to just reiterate what I said earlier. Start setting your objectives and expectations and identifying the means you're going to start